Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 7:38 a.m. East Coast time, Tuesday, July 2nd, and there's a full slate today, 15-game MLB slate. There is a lot of different options to go to. Some things we'll touch on right from the get-go in terms of players not in the player pool on Draftkings, but actually making a debut today from the minors. And then we'll get into some other things. So if you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. My name is Sal Vetri. I cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, which is a video up for that, MLB, which you're looking at right now. Can't wait for the NFL. We'll have an article also for this major slate up on Patreon later today. What I do there is I kind of just rank 3 or 4 main or key targets and then a couple of other options that you can go to for both pitching, hitting options, in forms of stacking. So people want to see more out of my offensive takes. Last night was terrible, but just in general, that's where I will have that extra content. I can't really get a video up later in the day, but I can do an article just based on logistics for me. So that makes sense if you want that over there. Let's get into this video. If you could just hit the like button. The subscribe button helps me out a ton. It just kind of builds a following, which allows other people to pay me third-party sources instead of you guys and girls watching this. So it allows me to keep doing it. Free content for you. I get content from somewhere else just because you hit that red subscribe button for free. So I appreciate it if you could do that. So let's get into it right off the bat. The Houston starters today, which pitching in Colorado is never great either, right? In Coors Field game today. Jose Urquidy, he is not going to be in the player pool today. He's called up. I'm not sure if anybody really knows that he's pitching today, but yeah, he's not in the player pool today. Just fact checked it, I guess, on Twitter. And then we're going to have Asher, and these names are just absolutely terrible. We're just going to call him Asher Wojciechowski. I imagine it's somewhere around there. Starting for Baltimore against Tampa today. He is in the player pool. He's 6,900. He gets the spot start today in that rotation. So interesting that Baltimore is just continuing to kind of push back days. That's 2 days in a row. They kind of give him spot starts to minor leaguers and pushing back all their starters. Not really sure why, but yeah, he's in the player pool as well. So those are the 2 new guys. One of them you can't even play in Jose Urquidy, but you can go into playing an Asher Wojciechowski. I'm not sure if I get there, but we'll talk about it. Look, 15 games, 29 pitchers to choose from, right? Since we don't have the one player in the pitcher pool, there's 7 guys that early on I have interest in. I'm going to kind of just skip to a couple guys who I think might garner ownership. Stacks will be mainly in the article. There's a lot of games, so I want to make this video digestible and quick for you guys as well. I get told sometimes I ramble. Don't care what you think, but yeah, we'll try and shorten it. So right at the start, $11,100. Patrick Korbin's my first interest. Look, he just dominated the last time out with this exact same start. He has now dominated the last 2 times he's played Miami. Somebody's going to echo, oh, but 3 or 4 times ago he got hit by Miami and only went 4 innings. Who cares? You're really going to base it on the one bad start that he's had. Your recency bias does not really affect me. The recency bias of him playing well in the last 2 games really doesn't affect me. The thing that affects me is that he's a lefty. Miami is going to roster 7 at least righties today. That's definitely an obvious downside in a lefty-righty matchup. And then even if he does have a lefty-lefty platoon, there's no advantage for the Miami bats in JT Riddle and Curtis Granderson because he strikes out 37% of them. He gives up absolutely no power to them. I don't care that this game is not in Miami. Now it's in Washington, a much more hitter-friendly ballpark compared to Miami for sure. Miami is just a 116 team ice, so they strike out now above average. They continue to pile up more and more strikeouts as these past 2 weeks, 3 weeks have gone on. Yeah, Patrick Korbin, the biggest favorite on the slate, second biggest favorite on the slate as of right now. Absolutely fine getting there as much as I can. I do prefer him to Trevor Bauer, who's going up against Kansas City Royals, who are just as bad of a team. Well, they're in the tier of being bad, not as bad as Miami. They're in their own specific tier. But for $500 more, I'd rather take the guarantees in Patrick Korbin. On a 15-game slate, I'm not worried that Corbin's ownership will get too high, at least in the lower stakes. Maybe in the mid or higher stakes it will. But I'm not worried about having to pivot just yet. I'll write up some things in the article about that if need be. Next person I have interest in is Matthew Boyd. He has a favorable matchup. He's going to be a small-size favorite against the White Sox today. The White Sox just strike out a lot. They're a team that doesn't have that much power. He has the best Sierra on the slate, which is surprising on a slate where you have Patrick Korbin, Trevor Bauer, right, even a Charlie Morton. 3.32 Sierra, so he's pitching extremely well. Only a 4.8% walk percentage, ranks as the second lowest on the slate as well. He doesn't really give up too much in terms of free passes, and he's working somewhat deep into the games, right? 6 innings per start. So $10,100, I'd rather pay an extra $1,000 for Korbin, but he also has a very similar beneficial matchup for strikeout upside. Strikes out both sides of the plate. Doesn't matter. He has advantages against both sides. 30% strikeout against lefties, 31% against righties. The only downsides for him is he will give up the home run. He does give up power to both sides of the plate, which is something that Korbin doesn't do. He gives up power somewhat to the right side of the plate, but nothing to the left. So I do prefer Korbin still over Boyd, but the matchup is really good for Boyd. I kind of glossed over Charlie Morton at $10,600. He's not one of my 7 interests, but he's somebody who should be considered because he is a dominant pitcher in terms of the strikeout stuff, right? Third or second highest on the slate, and Baltimore does struggle against righties, and they will strike out against righties. But that said, I do prefer Boyd just because there is a $1,000 difference between him and Korbin, so you are actually saving. For Charlie Morton, it's only a $500 difference, and I'd rather get to Korbin over Charlie Morton way more and probably every single time because this is a 15-game slate. Ownership's not going to be too impactful there. And then I kind of dropped down. I'm not really looking at anything in the 9K range. Zach Wheeler against the Mets is a no-go, or against the Yankees is a no-go. David Price against Toronto. I have a lot of respect for this Toronto team. David Price has been able to strike out righties, but he's also given up some power to righties. There's a lot of things that Price has done well this year, and now he's pitching in Toronto, which is going to actually help him in terms of actually, it most likely helps the hitters in terms of it being a little bit hitter friendly, so that'll actually hurt him. I was actually looking at the game above in Citi Field today. But yeah, David Price at 9,300. I don't want to pay that. He's a very good pitcher. He's probably underpriced, but on this big of a slate, I have more interest in probably the Toronto bats. Kyle Hendricks against Pittsburgh, he actually matches up nicely because he does strike out lefties, but he also does give up power to lefties, so that's something I'm going to stay away from, the lefties and Josh Bell's 3 home runs last night. But that's not the main reason. It's just overall in this range, I have other interests. James Paxton will be the third pitcher in my pitcher pool. Look, he's been really bad. There's something wrong with him since he came back from this injury, but the price point keeps coming down for a guy who realistically has like probably the third best strikeout stuff on this slate, maybe the fourth. You have Bauer, Korbin, and then probably Charlie Morton. Somewhere in there, James Paxton lies. I'd say it's the third best, if not the second best, right behind Patrick Corbin. So yeah, this is a guy with a lot of upside in that mid-range, 8,900. I'm not sure I can fit a Patrick Corbin and a Paxton. You're paying $20,000 for pitching on a big slate. Yeah, you could probably find the bats, but will you find the upside bats? Not sure, but I do have interest in this mid-range in Paxton over anybody else. He's pitching in one of the most pitcher-friendly ballparks on the slate in Citi Field against a team that does strike out against lefties, does not have as much power against lefties, and Citi Field will suppress that power overall. He strikes out a ton of lefties, a ton of righties. The only really downside for him is coming off this injury. He's kind of lost his control, 10% walk percentage, and he's given up a little bit more in terms of the power department to righties, right? He's up to a 203 ISO to righties, which means that's where the home runs are coming from. Put him in a ballpark that's going to be more favorable than the short porch in Yankee Stadium and right. And I think his upside can come back along. Look, he's not going to stay this bad forever. He's obviously working his way back from whatever injury. Is he still dealing with stuff? We don't know, and that's the risk here. But his price point is $2,000, and we're used to seeing it, or at least $1,500 less. So I'm fine getting there as my third pitcher in the player pool. And then the rest of the 8K range, not that intriguing. I don't want to go Herman Marquez against Houston in Coors Field. I like Marquez. He's probably too cheap, but I don't want to take that risk. If indeed somehow Paxton starts gaining ownership or Price starts gaining ownership, I'd be fine pivoting to Herman Marquez. Naturally, ownership will be extremely low in Coors Field, but you're going up against a team in Houston that does have the ability to put it out in that stadium. Now, somehow Marquez has really limited the damage in terms of walks and home runs per 9, but still, it's only a pivot spot, and even then, it's high risk. He's just one of the best pitchers in this range to pivot to. Definitely not pivoting to a Tanner Roark versus Milwaukee. Definitely not pivoting to the same guy in Jose Suarez, who was pitching yesterday against Texas. Still think Texas is a really good small stack option. I wrote about it in the article. I don't like their whole team to 5-man stack them, even if they have a beneficial total. It's Joey Gallo, it's Santana, it's Chu, and then really, okay, you can get to Andres, but do you really want to pay that much for him? Nobody else in that lineup really stands out to me as of right now with no Hunter Pence. Going down a little bit more, Dallas Keuchel is just not a good fantasy pitcher overall. Now he faces a team that just won't strike out, has power. He doesn't get strikeouts. Even if he goes deep-ish into the game, he has no way to get you fantasy point upside. My fourth pitcher in my player pool is Zach Gallen. He's been good in his first 2 starts, 17 fantasy points per start. He got these Washington Nationals the last time he pitched, and he got the win. Did not pitch exceptional, right? The win got him to 17 fantasy points, so that's never great. I probably don't get to him at 7,900, right? Based on the way that I want to build my lineups, I have a lot of interest in Patrick Corbin, but he is a mid-range option outside of the James Paxton, somewhat Herman Marquez range, where I do like getting to because he has shown an ability to strike guys out, right? Through 2 starts. I mean, it's very small, but a 33% strikeout rate, and he's a guy in the minors who's putting guys away. His lack of ground ball percentage is worrisome, 24% through 2 starts. Again, it's a small sample size, but that is going to translate more and more to home runs. The more and more that when you're not striking guys out, you're giving up fly balls at a 40% hard hit contact rate. So there's trouble probably on the horizon, or maybe so, just a little bit so, like a negative regression. Nothing major, but yeah, I think that he's been good through 2 starts. He's definitely in the player pool, but he's somebody that I probably don't get to just based on where he is at price point wise. The rest of the 7K range really isn't that interesting to me. Ross Stripling is going to be a huge favorite today, going up against Arizona. Huge favorite just in terms of because the Dodgers, who they're facing on the other end of this in terms of Taylor Clark. I'm not sure I want to get to Ross Stripling. I imagine he garners some ownership. I'd rather pivot to Zach Gallen here. Jack Flaherty against Seattle somewhere I'm not going to go, although he's probably underpriced. Trent Thornton against Boston, no. Jacob Junis against Cleveland, no. And Daniel Magnan against Minnesota, there's no way. I want Minnesota bats a lot today. Going to the 6K range, this Asher kid out of the minors for Baltimore, I have to look more into him. We'll write him up in the article. It could be a beneficial spot, but if he has been good in the minors, it could be a nice pivot spot. But right now, at the same exact price point, Matt Strom. So I imagine Matt Strom is going to be popular today at 6,900. If that's the case, you're going to have a natural pivot at the exact same position and price with this Asher Wojciechowski, and now you can become very interesting. Again, I have to look up his minor league stats. We'll put that in the article later today. But if he's somewhat decent in the minors, it's a spot start, so who knows? I might be getting to him. Chances are no, but we have to look and see how he's been doing. Matt Strom, though, would be the 5th pitcher in my player pool. Has strikeout stuff. Finally kind of saw that unravel in the last game. It's a beneficial matchup, a very, very good matchup in San Francisco, although this team just lit up yesterday, 13 runs, right? For the Allen kid. So I'm fine going right back to it. Recency bias hopefully takes some people off of them, thinking the San Francisco offense is now something that good, right? He does give up home runs, which is worrisome, but last game we saw the strikeout stuff come up. San Francisco doesn't strike out, so overall it's a safe matchup, and I'm fine paying $6,900 for a safe matchup. I just want 15 points, right? Get me 15 points, maybe a win, get me closer to 20. So he's the 5th player in the player pool. And then 6 and 7 will be Wade LeBlanc and Ronaldo Lopez. I have more interest in Lopez due to his matchup, right? He does have 24% strikeout stuff against righties, and he will face a good amount of righties, especially in the middle of the lineup. Castellanos, Miguel Cabrera against Detroit today. So he'd be my 6th player, and I have more interest in him than Wade LeBlanc. But LeBlanc coming out of the bullpen the last 3 to 4 starts this year, he's just been, fantastic. Now he gets the St. Louis team that's kind of lost their power stroke. Well below average now, one of the bottom 10 teams in the league in terms of overall power. Ozuna's kind of lost it. DeJohn's lost it. Paul Goldschmidt and Carpenter all year have not had it. They don't strike out that much either, but it doesn't really matter for him. He's not a strikeout pitcher. He strikes out lefties, which is somewhat good, right? You'll get some of the bottom of the order guys being lefties in this Cardinals lineup that you can kind of get to. But he's coming into the game in the 2nd inning, 3rd inning, and he's just automatically in line for the start, and he's pitching decent enough to get there. 5,800, 5,600, Wade LeBlanc and Ronaldo Lopez are in my pitcher pool. So the 7 pitchers I have interest in are Patrick Korbin. I can almost guarantee it I'm going to get to Patrick Korbin in my main lineup as of right now. James Paxton, I'm not going to try and get cute and get away from him. 15 games late, he won't be nearly as highly owned as he should be. So Korbin, James Paxton, Boyd, Zach Gallen, Matt Strom, Ronaldo Lopez, and LeBlanc. Odds are I get to Patrick Korbin and one of a Wade LeBlanc, Ronaldo Lopez, or potentially this Asher Wojciechowski kid if he's somewhat decent. If not, then I'll have some shares of a Matt Strom in San Francisco. And look, you're spending $11,100 on Patrick Korbin, but then you can just go down and not really spend anything when you pair him with a cheap pitcher. Overall, in terms of how much you're spending, it averages out to buying like 2 $8,000 pitchers. So that's it for right now. Appreciate you tuning in. Hit a like, hit a subscribe before you leave. Follow me on Twitter at SalVetcherDFS for updates. You can get the article over on Patreon. It'll be out later today. Link is down below. Peace out, gang.